question on camera, do be aware that you would be part of the recording, and by doing that, you'd be willing to be included. So I'm really delighted to have with us today Adam Corsini and Liam Cunningham, who are both members of the Layers of London project. It's a really exciting, crowdsourced online history project based here in the centre. And they're going to share some of their experience and their expertise in this masterclass on online engagement. Now, I've put the URL for Layers of London in the chat box if you don't know it already. If you're not familiar with finding your way around Zoom, you can turn on the chat box by going to the bottom of the main frame and clicking on chat, and that should appear on the right-hand side for you. So online engagement is increasingly a really important tool for any history, heritage or other project. And of course, for all of us right now, it's particularly crucial in the context of lockdown and social distancing. But I think it's only going to become more important and more useful in the future. I suspect there's a lot of different expertise in this virtual room, and it'd be interesting to touch on some of that later on in the questions and discussion. Thank you. What I'm going to say as well to start with is that today is a learning curve for me as well. This is the first public Zoom event that I've hosted, so I'm hoping to pick up lots of tips from the experts, from Adam and Liam, and please bear with me. You'll see a kind of learner getting used to the system here. A little bit of housekeeping before we move on. You'll see that all attendees at the moment are muted. That's just to ensure that we don't get any audio feedback or interruptions, and just for general security. Our event is going to be structured like this. We're going to have a short presentation from Adam, and then a presentation from Liam. And then Adam and Liam are each going to give us their very quick fire 5 top tips for online engagement. Adam, Liam and I will have a little conversation ourselves, and then we will open up for questions. Once we get to the question and answer session, there are 2 ways you can ask a question. You can type your question into the chat box. Remember, you open chat by going to the bottom of the screen and clicking on chat. You can type there. Make sure you're addressing your question to everyone, please. Or if you would like to ask your question on camera and speak, you can do that by raising your hand. You need to go to the bottom of the main screen, click on Participants, and again on the right-hand side, you should see an option to raise your hand. You might want to leave your chat box open throughout the event and share kind of comments and thoughts and responses, but we won't take questions from the chat box until the Q&A session. So I'll let you know when you can start typing your questions into the chat box. Final thing, we would really welcome live tweeting from this event. So if you're that way inclined, please use the hashtag #EngageMasterclass. You could also use the Centre or Layers Twitter handles if you want. They're also there in the chat box. Thanks very much. Right, all the housekeeping out of the way. So it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague Adam Corsini, who's Public Engagement Officer for Layers of London. He's going to introduce the project a little bit for those of us who might not be familiar with it, and reflect a little on running virtual workshops and webinars and crowdsourced projects. Thank you very much, Adam.
Okay, hi everybody, thank you for attending this afternoon. As Catherine said, I'll be running through what Layers of London is about, just to give people a bit of context and a bit of background to it, and then sharing some of the experiences that I've encountered as the Public Engagement Officer for Layers of London, and how we've started to move things online during the whole lockdown, and some of the things we've learned in transferring our work to Zoom. So as a sort of get out clause, I guess, I've titled this an alternative guide to online engagement, because I'm aware that there might be different people attending this, some that have had years of experience with running online events and online engagement work, and some that might be brand new to it and completely fresh. So please don't feel I'm patronizing people if I'm stating the obvious with some things, but hopefully you'll find the stuff I'm going to say useful all the same. So without further ado, if you've never encountered or been to Layers of London's website before, to summarize what we do, it's a map resource. It's a resource that has gathered together historical maps and data sets from many different institutions, from the large scale ones like the British Library, Historic England, the National Archives to the smaller institutions, the local administrative borough archives, and even in one layer, there's an artist's project that gathered together drawings from local residents to create a new map, and that's been included on Layers of London as well. So in many senses, we've crowdsourced all these different collections from various different sizes and brought them all together in that sense. But then when it comes to the traditional sense of crowdsourcing, what we also have on Layers of London are user-generated content in the forms of pins, which you can drop on the map in any place, and you can upload your own personal histories, memories, interests, any aspects about London that you find interesting as an individual. And those can be connected to other websites, so you can credit and source your information, but you can also link to other websites to provide that connection and make Layers of London work very much like the cover of a book that's directing you to the content inside, or a signpost that's directing you to elsewhere. So those are the two main ways that we have brought our content together for the website. But then there's also a third aspect, and that's this crowdsourcing element, which relates to the actual projects we run. So what you can see here is a map which has stitched together images from Historic England's photographic archive. So these are images that were taken by the RAF after World War II. And as a crowdsourced project, we've asked people to georeference each image to ultimately create one huge mosaic, which gives a Google Earth of 1945 for London. So all three have come together to make Layers of London what it is, really. So going into a bit more detail about this, what exactly have we done? Well, we have devised those mapping campaigns, and one of the most successful ones that we've run was a project to try and map London's pubs, and these are both historical pubs but also contemporary ones. And the way we did this was to run a volunteer program and assign people different postcodes, and then they started to go out into the area and research the historical closed pubs and start to put together this collection. And I'm really pleased to say that now we have over 1,000 individual pins and records relating to London's pubs. So there are campaigns that we've instigated, and that's the first way that we've done it. And then there are projects where others have come up with the idea and we've supported those campaigns. So the one you can see now on the screen is a project by a company called Our Hut, and they wanted to create a group of volunteers to map London's ventilation shafts. And now we almost have 100 records relating to those ventilation shafts. So we can support others in their projects in terms of using Layers of London as a platform. I've mentioned this one already, but we're creating new maps as part of an online community, and we have pretty much 99% complete now for this Historic England map of the RAF images. And you can see it covers the majority of London, and it's really a fantastic thing to say that each one of those individual images has been georeferenced by a member of the public, and it's brought about some really interesting results in terms of who's georeferencing and who benefits out of this, which I'll touch on later. And then the final thing is that we really want to try and promote Layers of London as a platform which others can use off their own backs without even necessarily contacting us. So here's a group of records that members of the City of London Archaeological Society have put together. These are all records relating to the Thames at Warpath, and you can see they create a nice route which can, once everybody can get out, can be walked along the path, and you can potentially have a look at these images and these records as part of your tour of this route across London. So those are the four real things: our own devised campaigns, supporting others, creating these online communities, and encouraging and inspiring other people to contribute in their own right. So the big question then, how have we done this really? So first of all, it's volunteer teams. All this couldn't have happened without members of the public and groups of individuals coming together to help add content to the site in all its various guises. So top left-hand corner is a picture of one of our students who helped us in an event here, and our volunteers range from all different ages and backgrounds and all different topics. And as well as the individuals that might come as placements, we've also had teams such as the London Pubs teams, who are all assigned a different postcode to map those pubs. We've had teams that have taken publications and started to map articles from those publications. So Friends of Hackney Archives were a similar team, and London Archaeologist magazine are a team in that respect. But then we've also had direct contact. So it's very much a case of still going out to groups. And when we could physically go out and visit groups, we did so, whether it be at meetings, society events, or whether it was big festivals, we will contribute and being part of those events. Now we've started to move those meetings online. So we're starting to work with groups, but running training sessions as webinars instead of physically being face-to-face. But there's a real power in having that face-to-face contact, even if it is face-to-face via a monitor or a screen. I think one of the really important things is to embrace every project with open arms, to not sort of think of what problems might arise, but really think of how can we make this a real positive and make sure this works and find the solution. So it's really trying to embrace every kind of event and every kind of project to just spread the word and make people aware that they can use a platform like ours in any way possible. So I think when thinking about online engagement, it's very much a case of thinking how your online work can work for your audience rather than necessarily working in the first instance for you. It's that two-way process. And then the other way we've promoted a lot of the activities we've run is by social media. And I won't say much about this because Liam will be telling you more about some of the approaches we've taken with our social media campaigns. And I usually, whenever I've spoken about public engagement or online engagement in the past, I usually have this, how have we done this question? But then I have this other one, which is, yeah, but how have you really done this? Because some of the things that I say aren't necessarily cliched, but some people might find that, yeah, that's pretty standard, volunteering and going to events and this kind of thing. So these are sort of extra tips I suggest, I guess. And the first is, I would say, go for the obvious. If you're trying to run an online campaign or some kind of online engagement project, it's a good starting point to go for things that you think will pretty likely to be successful. So we went for the pubs project with a good idea that it's a topic that most people will probably be engaged with. It's a theme that spans a different demographic ranges in London. And we've had that successful feedback in that respect as well, where we do have people from different backgrounds and different ages that have engaged with this project. The second thing is just really being positive and saying yes and snapping up those opportunities. So in the past couple of weeks, our very own Professor Catherine Clark here tweeted this tweet about post boxes, and wouldn't it be great to photograph post boxes in London following a project that was taking place in Winchester. So so basically we just said, yeah, why not, let's do this. So so there's our tweet in the top right hand corner, and in the past fortnight we've had over 100 different post boxes that people have tweeted to us. So now we're hopefully going to come up with a more succinct projects to really develop this and add content to the Layers of London website in addition to Twitter. I think a really important thing is to make sure that your online engagement is fun and it isn't dry, and it kind of goes, it makes people want to join in. And that's true for all engagement, but I think even more so for online engagement, because people need a reason to get involved. And if they see it's got a bit of playfulness and it's a bit, it has that enjoyable aspect to it, I think that definitely adds to that experience. So if there's a way that you can turn it into a game of sorts, gamification, that kind of stuff, that's always a good thing. And one of the things we did whilst in lockdown during April was off the back of a project I've previously run in a different job, but we basically played a layers lottery where we divided up all our different layers that we have on the website and gave them a number, and then people could tweet us a number between 1 to 230, and then we shared whatever corresponding layer that was. And then the final thing I would say is, if you're doing online engagement, which is hopefully resulting in some kind of content, be that description or some kind of record like ours are, I would say that you need a certain amount of flexibility. So I'm a real advocate for plots and not scripts. So what I mean by that is to come out with an outline of what you kind of want, but not be too prescriptive in the sense that here's your template and you have to write it this way. And that works really well for the pubs, where we have a nice range of content for this pub project. And that goes back to another thing where plans are all well and good, and you should kind of have a little structure and plan in place, but I prefer to think of preferences rather than plans. This was something that I've used from a completely different experience when me and my wife were having our children, and you come up with a birthing plan. We're like, well, actually, we come up with birthing preferences, because sometimes things don't always go to plan. So preferences are, I think, are a lot better than plans per se. These are a few things that we've learnt. The first thing I would say is that you should really believe in whatever you're doing, and you should get involved and be part of it and experience that experience. Because if you've just come up with an online project and you just throw it out there for others to do, and you're not really experiencing what that's like, it's okay, but it's not as good as if you know what's going wrong or what's going right and you're experiencing that. So this image here is a campaign that we ran last December, where we were hoping to get people's memories of what they do on the 25th of December, whether they celebrate Christmas or not. So here's, I'm very pleased to be able to share with you today a picture of me as a little baby and my brother in our pram, and this is a record that is on Layers of London. But on that note, I'd also say that you should fail happy and embrace your mistakes, and if they don't go to plan and if they don't work out, learn by them, because this campaign here didn't work at all. Hardly any members of the public contributed to this project. And whilst we promoted it we had events in Stanford's bookshop, map shop, and we had quite a big social media campaign as well, it didn't really capture people's imaginations. So we've learned some of the lessons from that when we're trying to do these type of projects in the future and currently. And this one's a bit ironic, I guess, because I always prefer to go live in my events and have some kind of live interaction. If I'm working on the website Layers of London, I like to show that website rather than necessarily doing PowerPoints, which I know is a bit crazy because I'm doing a PowerPoint now. But if possible, if you can add some kind of live interactive element to your presentation or project, it's a really impressive and good thing to do. So here's a picture of us when we launched our georeferencing RAF project, and we did a live georeferencing activity on the spot there, which could have gone wrong, but the fact that it worked out fine and we did do it live was really appreciated by the audience there. And that just leads me on to say that any kind of interaction, and that's not only in online activity like this, but also when you're thinking of online engagement, I think it's such an important thing to still remember that online engagement doesn't mean that you don't have to interact with your volunteer teams or your audiences. There's still a huge amount of interaction. It isn't just something that's like, oh, it's okay, people can just do it remotely or stay away from a physical venue. There's still quite a lot of interaction. In fact, it's essential to have that interactive element. And then webinars, if you have to move things online, webinars are great. And some people might think they're just presentations with no trousers on. I just want to reassure you, I am wearing trousers today, but there is this image here of this guy on Good Morning America who wasn't. So are webinars just presentation, no trousers on? No, of course they're not. Going online, these are the kind of things we've learned. So there's this question of webinars versus mass meetings. So this afternoon's event is actually a meeting on Zoom as opposed to a webinar. And there are pros and cons of both. If you're having a large group event like this and you want people to be able to to use their microphones nice and easily, or potentially share their video screens. This is a much better way to run an event. If you want to make it very much like just live streaming and watching a YouTube video, for instance, or YouTube Live, Facebook Live, then webinars might be a better thing to do. I think the real thing though is to be able to have that control and keep that control. So whether it's a meeting or a webinar, and there are like I say, there's pros and cons. You can have polls, you can have breakout rooms, that kind of stuff. But the really important thing is to be able to keep control of that online meeting and be able to mute people if necessary, turn off videos, and know what you can and can't do as a host, I guess is what I'm getting at. There is that question of whether video should be on or whether video should be off. And we've chosen to have our videos on today. And I like this aspect because I think, again, it's really important to have that eye contact. Right now I'm sitting in my daughter's bedroom, and it's a very strange setting. So I'm looking directly into this camera screen now, but I still feel like there's a need to be able to see Catherine and Liam on the screen, and hopefully know that all of you are looking directly into your screens at home. So I think it's important to be able to have that eye-to-eye contact still. And then there are things to remember about going online where you can still do a lot of stuff. So the share screen aspect is fantastic because you can share videos, you can share PowerPoints like this one here, you can share websites like our Layers of London website as well. And that's been a huge benefit to be able to continue doing the work we do, the engagement work, via Zoom and via other apps such as Teams and Skype and other video sharing websites. So yeah, this is the most important one. I mentioned it before, but interaction is key. So throughout this event today, please do use the chat, the Q&A, as Catherine is saying, raise hand and we can open your mics, because it's still all about interaction, whether you're doing physical face-to-face stuff or whether you're doing face-to-face via a monitor and a screen like this. The interaction is the key element, really. So I'm going to end it there. I'll share a few of my tips in a bit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Adam. So perhaps Adam and Liam could swap. Liam could start sharing his screen. Thank you so much, Adam. And hopefully what you can all see is that we're looking at one case study project today, Layers of London, but there are all kinds of sort of transferable approaches and insights that I hope either you recognise from your own work or you could think about bringing to your own projects. And I think some of those themes around playfulness and gamification and competition, or working with kind of devolved and autonomous sub-projects that are things we might return to later. And I also want to pick up on what Adam was saying about how good it is to go live. And I'm hoping, Adam, that we might be able to get you to do something live and interactive with us perhaps later on. Thank you. So I will now hand over to my colleague, Liam. Liam Cunningham is Volunteer Coordinator and Communications Officer for Layers of London. He's going to share some insights on identifying and reaching your online audiences and social media strategy. Thank you very much, Liam.
Okay, thanks, Catherine, and thank you all for attending today. Catherine said, my name is Liam Cunningham, and I've been working on communications on the Layers of London project for the past 18 months or so. So managing our social media, writing blogs, sending out newsletters, and generally just trying to build our audience online. I think because Layers of London is a digital project, and though we have our other strands of activity like our volunteering and our or used to be our face-to-face events, it's always been recognized that our digital and online activities were very important for the project's success, because one of the principal aims of the project is getting people to use and engage with our website. So we've always recognized this as an important element of our project. And really just over the past 18 months, it's been, or since the project began, it's been a process of trial and error and experimenting with different approaches and seeing what works. I think every project is different, but hopefully I'll be able to share some general principles and my experience and some tips that might be applicable to your work. And I'll also be very interested to hear different people's perspectives in the Q&A portion later. So just move on to the next slide. Okay, so I have split this presentation into just a few general headings, and first of which is identifying your audience. So I've seen this a lot in different like marketing strategies. The first thing you're supposed to do is always to think about who you're talking to. Yeah, so I say here, to know what to say, you should think about who you are saying it to, which I think when I first thought about doing this, it seemed like very abstract and hard to know why. But then as you carry on, I think makes more sense, and having done some work and asking yourself questions about what kind of audience you're trying to reach, it can really help you when you're choosing kind of what platforms to use and what kind of what tone to strike, and just kind of generally what you're going to share online to build your audience. So I have it split into two sections here. So before you think about your audience, I think you should think about, turn inward and think about who you are. So say with Layers of London, we need to think about what is our aim, and our aim is to get lots of different types of people to engage with our website and to learn about what we have to offer, which is the maps and the crowdsourced histories that Adam discussed in the last presentation. So think about the project in a broad term. You might say the crowdsourced digital history mapping project, which 5 words, when combined together, might excite some people, but probably not most people. So you need to break it down into like the different elements and think about what is the project. So think about the keywords. So like with Layers of London, for example, obviously London is a major keyword, but we have like history, local history. On the site, there's lots of great photographs, there's illustrations and art. We have like our bomb damage map and those RAF aerial images. So you could say that World War II and the Blitz are other keywords. 1960s London music. Our site covers like everything, so we could break it down all day. But just from coming up with a few keywords, you can already see like there's different ways to get in to like to sell the project, or to like different aspects to focus on that'll interest different people. And by doing something like that, by breaking it down to the constituent parts, like say for example with World War II, we wouldn't think of ourselves as a World War II history project. By having that on a list of keywords, we think, oh, this is something we could promote. And like say around times like VE Day, you can think, oh, people are probably interested in learning more about World War II. They can do that on our site, and this is a good way we can put that out on Twitter if you're interested in seeing the bomb damage map or the RAF aerial images this VE Day. Check out our website. So I think it's just really important to, you know what your project is, but you think about all the different ways that it could be viewed by people with different interests. And after that, what do you find engaging? So yeah, I think that's also important to put yourself in like the position of as an audience member, because when you're not building an audience for your project, you're probably consuming other people's content and seeing other things that other people are doing online. And just think about kind of what you find engaging, or things you've seen that you thought were well done, and think how you could be inspired by those. And then, yeah, who is my audience? So think about what different kinds of people am I trying to reach? So in these marketing strategies that I mentioned earlier, they recommend that you really do a deep dive into the personality of your imaginary audience member, and basically complete an entire personality survey for them. So I have, yeah, here is an illustration with the different headings and subheadings of all the questions you need to ask about the person that you want to see your website. And this is kind of a daunting thing to do, but I actually do think it's useful, because if you have the time to go through it and do this for the audience that you want to attract, it can be really useful, and it just brings up different ideas of things you can focus on, or things that you think would work for different people, and it kind of makes you realize how different people are attracted to different things. But I recommend this as an exercise. It's called an empathy map. So if you go on to Google and just Google empathy map, you'll be able to find that easily. But just to go back to the previous slide and some basic questions. So what different kinds of people am I trying to reach? So say, for example, with Layers of London, we're trying to reach people who work in the heritage and education sectors because we want them to engage with our project and collaborate with us and use our website for their work. We also want to reach people who have more casual interest in London and local history, which obviously that's a very broad group, but we kind of think about where do you find those different people, how would they find information online. People who do these things professionally might look at blogs in the sector, but people who have more casual interests will find stuff on social media, on Facebook, and more general interest websites. So yeah, that's a question about where do they get information online, and I'll return to that in a bit. So move on. But just to, yeah, when you're getting started, or even at any point when you're trying to boost your audience or the people who are following you online, it's good to think about the different ways you can do that. So for example, tap into networks you are already a part of. So say you're starting out on social media, or you have you have like 100 followers, but you'd like a lot more. You can think about people you have connections to that might be able to help. So like, for instance, Layers of London is part of the Centre for the History of People, Place and Community, which is part of the Institute of Historical Research, and they both have Twitter and websites and different presences on social media that have a following. So they can include, we can ask them easily because we work with them, can you include a link to Layers of London on your website and share our stuff on your social media? And that's just a really easy way of sharing your content wider and getting more followers because they work with you, so they have to say yes. But even if you're not part of an institution like that, you probably have friends and family and colleagues who are on social media and Twitter, and you can always ask them, can you please follow me and just share my stuff? Because I think people are always happy to help, that kind of thing, and share and like the work of others. So that's the other way around, that you can also help other people who are getting started, or help anyone at all, just by, when you're on Twitter, by liking things that you like, and by retweeting them, retweeting things that you think your followers will find interesting, and then that will help get you noticed by the other people, and it kind of creates a virtuous cycle of kind of assistance. So reach out to people who might be able to help by mentioning your work. So yeah, I would identify, so you've thought about who you want your audience to be, and it's good then to think about what are outlets or people who already have that audience. So for example, there's this website, The Londonist, which is a page that shares lots of interesting information about London, a lot of stuff about events that are going on around town, just interesting articles like secrets of the tube and Hyde Park, hidden Hyde Park and stuff like that. So we have been mentioned by them a few times. We've had articles written about us by them, and each time we've seen a significant boost to the traffic on our website. And I think we've just asked them, could you please feature us? And they have had no problem saying yes. I think they're always looking for interesting content as well. And then when you think about it, it makes sense because Layers of London and The Londonist, both people who are interested in Londonist will be interested in London and finding out interesting things about the city. So Layers of London is a natural fit for them to go to. So the Londoners already have the audience that we want. So it makes sense for them to ask them to promote us. On the other hand, we were featured previously in the Daily Telegraph, which you think is a national newspaper with a huge circulation. And we thought this might give us a boost, but we didn't really see that much difference in the traffic. And I think that's probably because people who are reading Daily Telegraph are reading it for all kinds of reasons. They like want to know about the news and international affairs and analysis. So Layers of London, although some of them might be interested, that's not what they're looking for when they're reading the newspaper. So I'd identify places that I think would funnel users to your project, and just get in touch and see what they can do. And similar things for people. I said here social media influencers, and we usually think of that word like Kim Kardashian. We don't, if anyone knows her, we'd be happy to collaborate. But actually, I think more about people like this guy I mentioned here, Jay Foreman. he makes videos on YouTube about all kinds of aspects of London's history and kind of urban infrastructure, and they're funny and interesting, and he has lots of followers on Twitter. So a few months ago, I started liking and retweeting loads of his stuff, and then in the past few months, he started retweeting us too, which is good because he has lots of followers, and we think they're probably interested in Layers of London because we have a similar area of interest. So I think, yeah, just identifying, that's the main thing, just identify who already has your audience and then see if they can help you get it. Because I think people we work with, everyone's always happy to help. And the final point here is make it easy for people to follow you. So yeah, I think if you have a website and you want people to follow you on social media, make sure that social media is prominently featured on your website. Similarly, you want people to sign up for your mailing list, make sure you link your mailing list on your social media, and just make sure it all links up so that it's kind of, you can get people, these are your fans and you want them to be signed up to all the different places they can be, and I think they'd be happy to, as long as it's easy for them to find it. So next section, reaching your audience. So yeah, I just wanted to cover here two kind of main places that we communicate with with people who follow us. So we have our mailing list. I think this is a really useful thing to have, is to have a regular newsletter that goes out, because we put up all our activities on social media and on our website, but those things can be easily missed because people aren't monitoring our Twitter page all the time. But you do have, once you have them on your mailing list, you have a surefire into their mailbox once a month or something, so you can share all your activities there. We use MailChimp, which is free up to 2,000 users, and they provide lots of useful information like how to write a good email or attractive email, and provide lots of stats on the emails you do send out, so you can see what's working. So you can see what is working. Sorry, I accidentally went into the chat and I covered everything. Where did I go? Oh yeah, and I would just recommend sending out the newsletter regularly, but be consistent, like do it once a month. Don't do it kind of in a scattershot manner, because I think that's good. It's a good way to avoid like annoying people with emails coming in all the time, and keeping it regular. Make sure you remind them regularly of your activities and that you exist. Oh yeah, and just share interesting and useful information. So make it like, don't just promote yourself, just have something that's of interest in the newsletter that makes people want to open it, like some behind the scenes information, or write an extra little blog article that can be included in the newsletter and make people kind of feel like, even though it's free, they're getting bang for their buck by engaging with your newsletter. And then onto social media. So yeah, I think different social media platforms can be used for different things. So with Layers of London, we primarily use Twitter and Facebook. I think, like I said earlier, we're looking for different audiences, like people who work in heritage and education. I think a lot of people who have professional interest in that will be on Twitter and follow lots of accounts to do with that. So that's a really good way of communicating with them. But say more casual, people with more casual interest, or maybe older people, are less likely to be on Twitter and more likely to be on Facebook. So one of the good things about Facebook is that there's lots of like niche little groups. Like say for us, there's lots of groups for different neighborhoods in London, like say Shoreditch Memories, where people share old pictures of Shoreditch or anecdotes from when they were young and lived there. And they're like, we thought they were a natural audience for Layers of London, these people. So we started our Facebook account and started messaging these little groups, but there's these little groups for every kind of topic. So South London photography, or carpet lovers, I don't know, all kinds of things. So whatever your project is, there's probably a market on Facebook that you can identify and get in touch with. Another thing that Facebook is good for is events, because I'm sure, as you all know, when you click interested or going on an event on Facebook, it'll remind you up until the event happens that you're interested in this event, which reminds people to attend, and then also it shares with all your friends on Facebook that you're going. So it's a good way of kind of of boosting profile of an event, and it goes out to, it'll create bigger circles. I'm not sure how to phrase that, but yeah, and think about where your audience is getting information online. So that was the two, those two groups that I identified earlier. So yeah, with heritage and education professionals on Twitter, there's lots of great content being put out all the time, and that's a really good way to identify projects that you can collaborate with, and also projects that can help you boost your profile, like we discussed earlier. And decide where to focus your energy. So for instance, we're on Twitter and Facebook, but another big platform is Instagram. But we thought it would take a long time to build our profile, and we weren't sure if that was the right place to for us to promote our activities. It's kind of more broadcasting and less communal, we thought, than the other platforms. So we decided that we wouldn't bother with Instagram, just as a way of like doing our social media strategy and thinking about the resources we have and what will work. But the IHR is on Instagram, so we were able to collaborate with them and put some posts up, so we still get some footprint on that platform. So think about things like that as well. Hopefully that. And just this is my last slide, communicating with your audience. So I think the main thing is creating engaging content. I think not many people set out to create a great Twitter page for your project, unless you want to be a social media influencer. But it can't just all be promoting yourself, or like saying, we have this event coming up, please come, or please sign up to be a volunteer. You kind of have to balance it between creating engaging content, stuff that's interesting and entertaining. That's the kind of thing that attracts people, and that makes people like and share, and increases your profile and kind of builds your reputation. And as Adam was saying, kind of makes people think, oh, hey, they look like they're fun. So maybe I like fun, I should like them. So yeah, if you have photographs as part of your project, it's always good to share, or if you have interesting anecdotes or quotes from interviews or anything like that, stuff that you think will grab people's attention. I'd also say, yeah, adapt with the times. Like we were in lockdown now, which none of us really expected to be, but we kind of think about what different tweets can we put out and what stuff can we put on Facebook to kind of capitalize on the moment. So we thought Layers of London, that's a good thing for people to do if they have more time at home or they're going to be on their computer more. So we promoted all the different strands of activity that they can engage with on our website, and just kind of do stuff for Easter, do stuff for Mother's Day, do stuff for any time. Just kind of think what's trending, I suppose is what people say in the biz. But yeah, be adaptive and look at what other people are doing. I think there's so much great work being done on social media by loads of different heritage organizations, really creative stuff that you might not even think is possible, but like say the Museum of English Rural Life here, which I have a screenshot from, they post loads of images from their collection, and always with these really witty, dry wit comments, like the Museum of English Rural Life doesn't seem funny, but they've made it funny. They've gotten like a big following from this. Loads of their tweets have gone viral, and I think that's something. It's like, oh, you don't actually have to play by the script of what you think your project is. You can mix it up a bit. I don't think I could come up with as many jokes as the person who writes their tweets, but it's inspiring to see. And then I have a screenshot here of the Youth Club Archive, which is a project that we collaborate with and the Centre collaborate with. And they have really great visuals. They have great eye for engaging images, and all of their social media and their website looks great. So it's kind of, just good to look around to see what other projects that might be related to yours or aren't even related, but kind of get inspiration from what they're doing and see what kind of stuff is possible on the different platforms that you're using. And my last point here is find your voice. So I think with Layers of London, we are, like, one of the main things is that we want all kinds of people. We don't want it to be intimidating. We want lots of people to access our website, and you can see that on the website. It's colorful, there's lots of pictures. it's not like a typical academic project. So the voice we kind of use in our newsletters or in our blog posts or in our social media is like casual, sometimes humorous, and kind of reflects what we want people to think about the project. But maybe what you have is you're dealing with a different kind of topic, maybe a more sensitive issue, you need to use a different kind of register or more formal, or you want to be more authoritative, or you could go with the way of the Museum of English Rural Life and go completely crazy absurd. It's kind of just like seeing what's right for you and like seeing what you can do, like what's natural for you, and what would appeal to your audience. Yeah, then you go back to your questions about who your audience are and what do you think they would like. Just depends on background, age, different kinds of people will find a different kind of voice engaging. I think I can't say all the different kinds, but there's lots of useful resources online that you can find for how to find the right tone and the right register for that. So I'll be back on my tips later, but that's it from me for now.
That's brilliant, Liam. Thank you so much. What really struck me actually all the way through your presentation is I think audience was my word that I used in the kind of the billing for today's event. But what really struck me through everything you were saying, Liam, is you're thinking so much more kind of actively than that, actually. Thinking about networks and relationships is in many ways so much more productive than thinking about audience. And I also noted down, I loved what you said about you don't have to play by the script of what your project is. I think that's lovely, and that this might not be about starting up a new project like Layers of London, but even a project that's been running for a long time. So another project in our centre is the Victoria County History, a local history project that's been running 120 years, but we can think in fresh ways about what idioms we use, what tone, how we promote the project online. I think that's really exciting. Thank you. Right, so Adam and Liam, you're going to have to be super quick, guys. So just a minute each maybe on your quick fire top tips. If there was a drum roll button on Zoom, I'd be pressing it now. Adam, do you want to share your screen again so we can see those tips as well? So over to you, Adam. Thanks.
Okay, so nice and quickly, some simple top tips really. First of all, it's just like any event. If you're online's the same, be prepared. Log in early to make sure everything's working correctly. Turn off other devices. So I've turned off the Wi-Fi and iPads, tablets, mobile phones, that kind of stuff. And I think even more essential if you're doing online stuff is to make sure you've got some kind of water, because if your mouth goes dry, have something to hand, which can easily be forgotten about. As Catherine did at the start of this, it's really important to start by explaining the application, because you shouldn't underestimate or overestimate people's ability to use different applications. So how you can comment, how you can leave messages, that kind of thing. Facing your audience, it's really tricky sometimes to remember that you're talking into a tiny little camera, especially if that camera isn't on top of the screen, and you might easily get distracted by what's going on the screen itself. So if you can, always remember to look directly into that camera, and then avoid distractions, because sometimes pop-ups come up telling you that people have entered the waiting room, or there's some new comment in the chat or a question. And again, it's really tempting to try and click on those as you're talking. So a real top tip is to avoid any distractions like those, and then really exploit the apps. So make the most of them. Use the screen shares, use the annotations. You can draw on the screen, you can use whiteboards. If you're running a seminar, just like a conference where you can have breakout sessions, you can have breakout rooms on Zoom, you can run polls, you can do lots of different things. So it's well worth having a look at the support guides and really making the most of any application that you do use. And those are my top 5, but I've got a cheeky 6, and that's simply don't panic. I have run a conference online and webinar and been part of it, and then my Wi-Fi just cut out. But then I was able to jump back in 5 minutes later. So if things do go wrong, they inevitably will. But the simple thing is don't panic. So those are my top 5+1 tips.
That's brilliant. Sneaky extra 6th tip, Adam. Fantastic. Thank you. Liam, do you want to share your top tips with us as well, please? Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, my top 5 tips are make sure to use links. So in Twitter, make sure you link to whatever you're talking about, and in newsletters or blog posts, make sure as many things as possible are linked to make it easy for people to get where you want them to go. And this is a double-parted tip. Link up the different strands of your activity. Like I said earlier, make sure your newsletter mentions your social media, make sure your social media mentions your newsletter, and make sure everything mentions everything else so that you're getting people to go where you want them to go. Pictures, content with images is more engaging. I think all, like on Twitter, the ones with pictures take up more space, so you're more likely to see them, and they draws your eye to them anyway. I didn't know how to illustrate this slide, so I just used a bunch of 5s, which I think still looks nicer than if it was bare. Stay visible. You can post regularly, send out newsletters consistently, and I know we all get busy with other things, so there's these tools like TweetDeck and Hootsuite, which you can schedule your tweets or your posts on other social media with those. So it's good to have things in the pipeline in periods when you know you're going to be busy, or if you're going on leave, it's good to stay out there and stay visible. Google it. So there's so much resources out there online that all of it's already, answer to every question you have is out there already. I have just pictured some here. So Get Certified in the Fundamentals of Digital Marketing is a free course from Google, and it really covers everything you need to know. Introduces social media, analytics, search engine optimization, and that kind of thing. It is, like a lot of things, it's aimed at like small businesses, so you have to do a lot of exercises pretending you're a hairdresser. So a lot of things you'll find are like that. So there's just this one guide. The principles are the same, but this one is for arts. This Way Up, a guide to arts marketing planning. And that's on a website called Culture Hub. So if you're interested in seeing something that has more of an arts or heritage focus, that's a good guide. And you can never be sure what's going to work. You try loads of things. Sometimes I have what I think is a great idea and put together an image that takes ages and prime my wording exactly, and then it goes nowhere. Nobody likes it on Twitter. And other times, like Adam mentioned earlier, we put up a challenge to get people to take pictures of their post boxes and didn't really give much thought. But then a day later, we had hundreds of post boxes in our inbox. So you just never know what's going to work. And if things don't work, it doesn't really matter because no one will remember it. So you can just try something else.
That's brilliant, Liam. Anything to add? Is that it?
That's it.
Perfect. We've got top tips coming out of our ears. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Adam, Liam and I were going to have a little bit of a conversation, but I think actually I might rein in some of my questions because I want to make sure we've got plenty of time for broader questions and discussion. But there was one thing I definitely want to pick up on. So I know that Adam and Liam, you and the Layers team, you run really successful weekly webinars at the moment. They've been really successful during lockdown, and you've had kind of sellout crowds every week. And I've seen you, Adam, lead some really interesting interactive webinars and workshops online. And you were talking about how good it is to do something live and interactive rather than use PowerPoint. Can we ask if there's something interactive you could do with us right now? I know it will only be in a limited form, but is there something we can get involved with?
Yeah, sure. So if I bring up the Layers London website, we could explore a bit of London based on one of you guys. So if you want to put a location in the chat in the comments, we can go into it and we can have a look at what the past that area used to look like. So I'll just I'll share the screen again. Just bear with.
Okay, fantastic. So if someone wants to type a London location, Streatham. We've got Streatham.
We have Streatham.
Yeah,
marvelous. Okay.
We've got Streatham and Finsbury Park. I think that will probably do for us, won't it? Let's start with Streatham and Finsbury Park. We'll have a look at those. And what I will do in a moment is I'll ask people, I noticed with a couple of questions, I'll ask people to start typing questions into chat in a moment. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
How am I spelling Streatham right? No, I need to spell it right first.
E-A-T-H-A-M. It's a tricky one.
S-T-E, Stret.
S-T. So this is the kind of.
I'll go for Finsbury Park and I'll read it in a minute. Hang on. This is where it goes wrong if you can't spell places in London. But we'll go for Finsbury Park first, and I'll come on to Streatham in a moment. So looking at Layers of London, I always expand the screen like this. Here's Finsbury Park. To bring up some layers, let's choose some layers here. And in fact, if we scroll all the way down and have a look at the RF collection that I mentioned earlier, we use this layer, close that. We can have a look at the spaces around Finsbury Park and what it looked like during or just after World War II. So if I bring up my tools here, got a lot of things on the screen at the moment, but we can start to fade those in and out. And if we move around, we can start to see how those images have been stitched together. And the joins here, and you can see they're quite seamless joins, which are fantastic. And then we could choose a new layer, for instance, like the Roke 10 mile round. If we use that layer, done. If I turn this one off, we can suddenly see, I'll just close that down, what this area of Dalston and Newington Green and Highbury Barn, this whole area here, around Finsbury Park, would have looked like basically fields back in the 18th century. So let me just quickly have a look at the chat. What do we have? I will copy and paste this to make it easier. And we'll now look at Streatham. And here's Streatham in the same period. We've got the High Street, and again, if I fade that in and out like so, you can start to see the different contours, the different field layouts, the road systems. It's on the very edge of the map, so it's just about picked it up here. And then we're placed on top of that the RAF images. All these have done as well. And it allows you to have a look at all those different roads, and you can zoom right in, and potentially you could go and explore your individual backyard and see if your house existed after the war, and if there was any bomb damage. If we were to, if I zoom right out and we move into, let's go up to the city, West End, we could, if I choose one further layer, I'll put on the bomb damage map. And now if I turn off the RAF images, we could have a look at some of the buildings that got hit during the war by the bombs, and then see how those are picked up. So these, according to the bomb damage map, got hit by bombs, but if we turn off the bomb damage map and the road map and turn on the RAF map, and let's just turn on this bomb damage map again, so we can make a comparison of these buildings here that got hit and compare that to what we can see here. So we might be able to identify the nature of those bombs and how that affected. You can see some of these buildings have been damaged and removed here. So there we go, a couple of areas that we just explored, and a way that you can use Layers of London's website.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Adam. I have to say, my heart is always in my mouth when you're doing these things live. I did see Adam in a live webinar, live geo-referencing the RAF aerial photos over the maps, and that was quite breathtaking. But I think it is really fun to get us involved. I think I'm going to now just sort of take on my chairing role, managing questions coming from everyone who's participating today. We already have 2 or 3 questions in the chat, and I'll start with those. If anyone else would like to type questions into the chat now, please do, or raise your hand, and I'll come to as many people as I can manage. So the first question was one that was asked to everyone really, but I want to put it to you, Adam and Liam. And this is from Emily, who's doing an MA in Public History. You can see this in the chat. And for a final project, she's creating an online resource about medieval dance. That sounds fantastic. But she wants to get her audience actively involved and to spark up a dialogue. Do you have any suggestions for how she could engage people with a project of this kind? Medieval dance. I'm a medievalist, and sometimes if you're working in a really remote historical period, you kind of have to think extra creatively about how you engage people. Would you have any ideas, Adam and Liam, as a starting point there?
I think, yeah, if I could start, I think that's a really lovely topic. Using dance is such a popular form of entertainment now, and my initial reaction to this is to think of something like Strictly Come Dancing, which gets hundreds and hundreds and thousands of viewers, And if there was a way that you could use something on that basis, then turn that into what you want to do, medieval dance. If there was a way to maybe create a few very short videos, just the dance steps or something like that. The costumes, I think that would be a fantastic way to engage people. And I think it's slowly taking elements of the overall project and then deciding on what each of the key themes would be. So be it, in this instance, the moves or the costumes or the types of people involved, the actual music that was played, that kind of thing. And then build up a series of engagement outputs, be them videos, be them images, even live demonstrations. I mean, that'd be an amazing thing. And I think also having discussions and these panel discussions and allowing people to share their ideas as well. I think those would be my idea, my natural things I would do in that situation.
That's brilliant, Adam. I love it. Liam, do you have anything to add on that one?
I agree. Videos, seems to be the way forward. This, if you're happy to take a video of yourself, or if you get you and your friends to do it together, like there's loads of videos of people doing like all kinds of dancing, like hip hop and twerking and whatever on TikTok or places like that. And I think it'd be cool to see people doing medieval dancing with the music.
It's great. I'd love to see the first academic project to base its online comms on TikTok. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? And I love the way you've both zeroed in on the costumes straight away. I think that is also a really key area. Fantastic. We've got another question from Charlotte Hill. Now, this is quite an interesting kind of question about evaluation. So Charlotte's asking, how do you measure the success? You know, how do you define that, or the impact or the value of your project? Those are quite interesting terms, aren't they? Do you set KPIs, key performance indicators, at the outset of your projects? And I guess this is something you do kind of throughout the project. You don't just do it at the end. Can you talk a bit about how you do that, Adam and Liam?
Sure, yeah. So there are KPIs for the overall project. But I very much look at, for me, it's all about how much you've engaged with the people and the experience they've had. So, and what I mean by that is if you had a KPI to have, in our instance, 100 records on one topic, but all those records are just one line and very dull information and people haven't really enjoyed it, then that hasn't really done anything. It's just ticked the box in terms of numbers. But if you've got 20 records that have got really juicy content and loads of people engage with it, and there's loads of social media activity related to that, I think those 20 records would be equal, even more important than if you had 100 records that were dull. So I think KPIs are important to give you a bit of focus in the initial planning of a project, but they shouldn't be the be all and end all. And I also think that even if your project is funded and has these KPIs, I think there's a really strong argument to say that success shouldn't just be a number thing. It should be people's response to it. So yes, we do have these targets and we do set our own targets and we do want to try and reach as much engagement as possible. But I think we also, when we evaluate what we've achieved or haven't achieved of a project, and I'll give that example of the Christmas one, the 25th of December again. I mean, ideally we would have wanted at least 50 contributions, but we didn't get any. And that for us could be seen as a completely rubbish, devastating project, but it wasn't, because we've learned different ways of approaching projects like that now, and we're currently running a project called London Arrivals, so we've taken a slightly different approach to that and started to target different audiences to try and get that interaction, and we are starting to see better results now. We have more than one, let's put it that way.
Fantastic. Liam, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that's the main thing. Just, yeah, we have the KPIs for the general project, but I think the day-to-day depends much more on like feelings. I don't know, just like seeing how things are going, and I keep an eye on like our analytics for the website and Twitter and stuff, and seeing things increase and stuff. But it's always just a case of, like I said before, trial and error and trying different things and seeing what people react to. Because we know what's good for us is like when we get like 50 likes or 100 likes on something, we like that's positive, and but we can't always be like we need to get that every day or something like that. It just kind of depends more on the time and the mood and stuff.
I remember really well actually when you were reviewing some of your targets around engagement with schools, and your targets are initially based on just a big number, having lots of schools engaged, and you realise that actually a better measure of engagement would be thinking about the kind of depth and richness of the interactions you're having with schools rather than just how many schools. So I think it was a really nice example of reviewing your KPIs during the project. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question because we have loads coming in, and it might be that other people in the room want to kind of respond to some of these in chat as well. And I should say any ones that we can't pick up during this session, hopefully we'll take a bit of time at the end, and the layers team might be able to respond to some of the questions as well. So we've got a question here. What do you recommend as the length of time for online events? Is a tricky one, a bit tricky for us today. Do you feel attention spans are the same as face-to-face events and interactions?
I think we generally try to keep it relatively snappy. We have like a weekly webinar which we run for about 40 minutes, which people can do kind of as like a after lunch activity, distract them from their work or something. Because I do think, yeah, maybe people sitting in front of their computers, there's less of the face-to-face like chat and the engagement between the participants. So I think it can feel a bit like a lecture more than one of our like face-to-face events are. But also, having said that, we have done longer form events, and they've also been very successful. I think it just kind of is a balance. I wouldn't go crazy long. I heard someone was in a webinar for like 4 hours or something, and it sounded like hell. But I think something like an hour and a half or 2 hours for a bigger event like this is good too.
Okay. Adam, anything to add?
I think if you're thinking of transferring conferences or discussions like this, I think it's really nice to hear some presentations from the panelists, but again, to keep them short. I'm a big fan of the 10 to 15 minute presentation as opposed to half an hour ones, which makes sense anyway, but because of time online. And I really do think in many instances, the more snappy and the shorter the better, like Liam was saying. Really, it's kind of, there's so much, everyone seems to have saturated the online market now, and everybody has to move online, but there's so many different things for people to see that it can also get quite tiring. I think it's really important to remember that screen time is more tiring than sitting in a lecture theatre listening to someone or going to an event. So I think those are the things to bear in mind in terms of the length of engagement.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think today we've tried to break up the content into different sections, haven't we? But I think we're kind of pressing at the limits, I think, for people's stamina. Thank you. This next question is really interesting. This is from Aaron Andrews, and he'd like to know more about the technical aspects of getting volunteers to do things like geo-referencing or pinning post boxes. What training have they had, and what software, what program are they using? And can I add to that I know that one of the things you've been doing with the geo-referencing is you've been harnessing very effectively a kind of element of competition. Could you talk a little bit about how that fits into the mix as well, alongside training and support? Thank you.
Sure. So for the georeferencing project, it was based on georeferencer.com, and in terms of the training, we had several different ways to do this. We held training sessions at Senate House when that was still a possibility. We had a webinar, a live demonstration of that via the webinar. We had user guides, and we also recorded our webinar, so that's on YouTube. Plus there was another instruction video. So I think what I'm getting at is basically use as many resources as possible and make it as accessible as possible. And the actual process was quite tricky, and Catherine mentioned this earlier, but originally we were meant to be running this project with schools, but we realized that would be way too difficult for the majority of school children. So as Liam was saying, it's identifying your audience. And if you've made a mistake with your identification in the first instance, don't feel afraid to then change your approach, which is what we did, and make it a more adult orientated project in that case. But then other things like the Postbox project, which isn't really a project, it's just a Twitter thing. In those instances, there weren't any rules or anything. It was just, hey, if you're doing your one daily walk around your local area, take your phone and take a photograph while you're there and send us a picture. So I think it really is a huge scale of that engagement.
Thank you. Liam, any thoughts on that?
No, I think Adam covered that.
Actually, can I ask you?
Maybe for a lot of our past volunteering projects, we'd like invite people in for a face-to-face training. Obviously now we can't do that. So I think we're learning at the moment as well how to go about this, but thinking about different ways to reach out to volunteers and to make it more of like a community thing. We had a little mini conference, and one of the speakers was Fran from the Courtauld Institute. She's running digital volunteering projects there, and she had lots of good ideas for creating chat rooms for volunteers to share links back and forth and talk about what they're doing. Because I think that is a difficulty now, when rather than just volunteers talking to us individually, how to get them to connect up. But we're looking at new ways of doing that now too.
That's great. You read my mind, actually, Liam. That was exactly the follow-up question I was going to ask you, because I think lots of us have experience of working with volunteers kind of in real life, face-to-face, and what you do to kind of engage and motivate your volunteers. And in my experience, that usually involves lots of tea and good biscuits. But I guess you have to think differently when you're doing it online. So it's really interesting hearing about the spaces that you're creating for that. It's great. Right, we have an interesting question from Paul Diggett, who is doing a PhD on Manchester. There's a bit of a killer question here. If he were to start thinking about doing something similar, I guess for Manchester, where would you advise starting? Big question. Where to start? I mean, Layers of London is a huge and really complex project, and I think lots of us are really impressed by it. I'm really inspired by it, but where do you start if you want to do something similar for your place?
Well, if it's a project like Layers of London, where you're trying to gather collections of historical maps plus Crowdsourced contribution, you need a good solid platform and a web developer in the first instance, and make sure they're on board. So we work with a team called Error, and they put together the whole website. But then in terms of once you've got that infrastructure in place, I think it's really then using other examples that are out there. So if you wanted to do something similar to Layers of London, I would suggest using us as an example of what can be achieved. And then having those discussions with the different institutions and organizations that you want to gather content from, and starting to sort of build that network of people. Because that's pretty much how Layers of London started off. We had the basic platform and design, but then we started, or the project manager started going and visiting the different local archives that are out there, and convincing the different organizations that this would be a great thing, and that rather than just having your own website and sitting alone out there, it'd be much more effective and better for the user to have everything under one resource. So it's really not even convincing, just making people open up people's eyes, I guess, to why this would be a good thing. So that would be my starting point, to sort of use other examples that have worked and say, this is what can be achieved. This is how I suggest we achieve it. Help me out.
Great. Liam, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think for like thinking about funding or like having a big website, think about what you can like do as DIY. Yesterday evening, I was watching a show about some guy who went around the world traveling to different restaurants, tasting the food, and basically it was a travel show about food. I was like, I'd like to do that. Maybe I can email the BBC and ask them if they'll give me a show. But they probably wouldn't. So I was like, I'll probably have to start a YouTube channel and Instagram and start making this myself before anyone will give me any money to do something. I'm probably not going to do any of that. But the same principle applies, that if you have a website you'd like to start, or a project like this, like there's loads of ways of starting a website really easily, where these platforms will do most of the work for you, like WordPress and other sites like that. So if there's information you want to put out online, I recommend starting your own website and putting the information you have already up and kind of spreading the word about that, and then seeing later down the line if there's a possibility of upscaling it.
That's brilliant, Liam. Thank you.
Just to add, I think the most important thing is that you really believe in the idea, and you're able to make others believe in that idea, because that's the way that these things gain momentum.
Great. Yeah, I think what's really clear from what you're saying is you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. This can be about kind of connecting up with other people. It can be, as lots of projects have done with you, it can be using existing platforms. This kind of connects up with a question Margaret Tedford has asked as well about platforms and software. There's a lot you can do even on things like Google Earth or Google Maps or History Pin, isn't there? And actually, ERA, the developers who developed the mapping platform for Layers of London, the IHR are kind of currently talking to ERA about how we might be able to make that mapping platform available for other academic mapping projects in future. So you heard that here first. Watch this space and see what happens with that. We've had a few questions to do with ownership of images and things. Could you just say something very, very briefly about how you're kind of partnering with archives and what you're doing about sharing images or the kind of image licenses you use, just very briefly?
Sure. So all content on Layers of London is shared under Creative Commons license. So that means that if images have come from an institution, you need to check to see what the copyright restrictions are for those. In quite a few instances, images are the license on the image means that you can share that content if it's not for, if it's for non-commercial purposes. But that is something you do need to check. But I think Creative Commons is obviously a fantastic thing. And if more institutions got on board with that and realized that there's a certain amount of risk, but not that huge amount of risk, especially if your images are low res or something along those lines. It just means that more people can access the content. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but with Layers of London, we always promote it as a signpost for the more detailed information or the more high res image. So if someone like the London Metropolitan Archives has posted a picture on Layers of London, there's a link into the Collage website, which has the more high res and the link to how you can apply for a full license for if you want to use that image. So so there's Creative Commons is a great way to share that content, but it's really important that any content is sourced properly and has the correct permissions before use.
Okay, there's a question here from Layla Kassir that I want to pull out because I know it's something you've really wrestled with in Layers, so it'd be good to hear your thinking. So she asks if you have any advice on how to ameliorate the digital divide. So kind of digital access, digital inclusion, exclusion. So how do you engage with communities who are either underconfident with regards to their digital skills or don't have access to technology? Now, I don't know whether you've thought about that particularly in a digital sense. I know you've thought about that throughout Layers in terms of connecting with harder to reach communities and making sure their London is represented in the site as well. Do you have any thoughts on that digital outreach and inclusion?
So that has been a lot harder since lockdown, and making sure that we have the same impact with those types of audiences as before. What we've started to do is work with organisations that link people that do have digital access to those that don't. So we're hoping to work with an organisation called North London Cares and South London and East London Cares, who connect older residents with younger residents in their communities. And the younger residents are skill sharing use of digital technology with the older residents. So that's one way to sort of tap into that audience, and hopefully the long-term result of that will be that these older residents will be sharing their memories of London and contributing to our website, but via the younger people in their neighbourhood. So that's one way to sort of think around it, and I think that's where volunteers come back into it as well. And admittedly, we haven't done that yet whilst in lockdown. But one thing that potentially we could have done was created a group of volunteers that were able to connect with people that didn't have as much access. So it's really finding the brokers or the bridges in between the different audiences out there.
Those are really useful terms, brokers and bridges. Thanks. Liam, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's been a problem for us because we're like an entirely online project during the lockdown. I mean, whereas before we could go around to different communities and share the website in person. But I think I agree with Adam that it is a challenge to translate that into when we can't have face-to-face meetings like that. But I think, yeah, connecting with those organizations that already have the links would hopefully get us over that.
As we said at the start of this session, we're all thinking a lot about online engagement right now, but it's going to be something we all want to continue and develop after lockdown. So thinking about that kind of blended hybrid approach after all this will be really useful for the future. Thank you. There's an interesting question here from Claire Titley, who's also asking something about that connection between real life and online. So she's taking a regular in real life event online during the current lockdown, and she's struggling to get her regular audience to come with her. So how does she encourage a long-standing group of users to take the plunge? And I'm sure, as she asked, she will find, we've certainly found with IHR events, we're extending and enlarging our audiences as well if we do things right. We're not just getting the usual people. But how do you get your regular audience, do you think, to make a switch from real life to online? Do you have thoughts?
It's a good question. I would say, I think we've been very lucky so far in that most of our audiences have happily come along with us, but then we've been an online website anyway. My suggestion, I suppose, would be perhaps to contact people individually first, or set up mini events, so it isn't a huge leap into the unknown. I am aware, and I imagine most people have seen some of the controversy around Zoom, and some people are a bit reluctant to link up like that. But then if you can use something that maybe is more familiar, especially if you're using it on a 1-to-1 or 1-to-5 scenario, so things like Skype or FaceTime, which have been around for a lot longer, people are more aware of it. And that could be one way to make people feel comfortable. And then when they feel comfortable and they're kind of more satisfied that they're not going to have any risk associated with it. And especially if what we do is while webinars, so there's very little that an attendee can do. It's pretty much just watching. And if they want to leave a comment, they can write in the chat. And that works really well for people that are a little less comfortable at going online. I think there's some people might assume that you have to show your video and you have to have your microphone on, and that simply isn't the case. So I think it's just making sure that you're reassuring and that people have that comfortable feel to it.
Brilliant, thank you. Anything to add, Liam?
Yeah, I think just whatever platform you do go with, to send out like a tutorial or write out really clearly on an email like how it works or how to access it. And also maybe, I don't know, send out a survey to your users to see like what are their concerns or what would suit them or what time would suit them. Maybe that's an issue. Like, I guess people have different situations now that they're at home more of the time. So maybe there's like, I don't know, just communicating to see how you can all meet in the middle.
Great, thank you. We've touched a couple of times there in your answers on thinking about different kinds of platform, and that came up in the questions from Annika McQueen and Claire Titley. So those questions around, security issues on different platforms, whether your own institution will allow you to use different platforms. I think that's probably a little bit beyond kind of the remit of what we can discuss today, but I think it's important that you've flagged that is an issue, and that is something that people will need to kind of navigate and negotiate. There's a question here from Charlotte, and she says, is it possible to evaluate why an event has gone badly or not attracted the intended audience? And I assume we're thinking particularly about online events. She says she's a big fan of trial and error, and you've spoken to us, both Adam and Liam, about kind of learning from things that don't go well. But she says budget and time restrictions can make it difficult. So is there a way of analysing why an online event doesn't work, doesn't reach the intended audience?
It's hard to know without knowing the specifics. But I think that would be, I don't know, maybe this isn't helpful, but to like rely on the network again of like, see if there's other people who've run events and see what they think of what you're putting out there, how you're describing it or how you're titling it. Sometimes maybe there's a hook in the event that you could latch onto as something to promote. Be specific and just you email us. Email me.
Thank you. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Just to say as well that after our first 4 webinars, I think, we emailed every attendee to just get some feedback on those. So even though you're moving things online, you're still ideally treating them like any other workshop or any other event where you do want to get that feedback. So if people have attended or but then you see them dropping off or something along those lines, then it's really good to understand what went wrong, really.
Yeah, I have to say I'm very relieved that we didn't see a kind of huge drop off in attendance today within the first 10 minutes. Hopefully it means we're kind of doing something just about right, which is good. That's great. What's really nice to see as well in the chat is that lots of people sharing some of their own kind of tips and insights too. And I'm really well aware that there's lots of expertise in the virtual room here today, but we're quite tight for time. So I'm sorry I haven't been able to draw more of that in. Maybe on a future occasion we could move to a more workshop style kind of expertise sharing format. That might be interesting. I think on that note, as we're approaching the end of the session, I'd like to invite you all, if you're able to share your feedback on today's event. There should be a mechanism to do that through Symphony. Please also feel free to tweet any feedback using that hashtag #EngageMasterclass. You'll be able to catch up on tweets from today's event with that hashtag from the Centre for the History of People, Place and Community Twitter account. I'm sure Layers will be doing lots of retweeting too. This event is being recorded, so we can make that available. There have been a couple of requests for the speaker's slides, so we'll see whether we can make those available too, but if not, they are part of this recording. So I realise we are pushing up against those stamina limits that we discussed, so I think here is time to draw it to a close. I'd like to thank Adam and Liam for their really great presentations today. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can go to the bottom of the main screen and click on reactions, and it will allow you to do a virtual clap, or you may wish to clap in the more traditional manner. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and for being generous with your own expertise and this really lovely feedback in the chat box. We hope to see you at another Layers of London or Centre or IHR event again in future. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Bye.